Hey, what's up? It's Kit. Time for another video. Welcome to 2022. This video has been quite delayed, actually. Again, this is the first video for 2022. I've just been busy with life and a lot of things happening all around, which required attention. Now, although I want to do this full time, in reality, I can't. It's just not, earning as much as I wanted to. But if you want to support me, I did open a Patreon, which I'll show you here. And also, we have created a merch line. And both of these things will help support the channel and just keep things going. Now, it's not much, but it does help. So yeah, if you're interested to support this channel more, you could like and subscribe, click on the notification bell. There's Patreon and there's also the merch. Okay, so let's get on with this. Now, Spool Dynamics, this is something that happens. It's just, there's no choice. There's no way around it. It just happens. And the more you understand these things, it could help you catch fish. For some people, it doesn't really matter, which is fine, But if you're aware of this, then maybe it'll help your fishing out because there's actually a few things that's happening while you're fishing without you noticing it, and the impact is actually pretty big. Okay, so these are examples. Let me take those off before we actually move on. But here, okay, so we have a big spool and we have a small spool. Now, simple enough. Let's do one revolution. Okay, so okay, it's there. So where it's tied off, okay, right there. And if you measure, it's actually quite long. Okay, stretch it out. Actually, even longer. So this one is 48 centimeters. Okay, so that's just one turn right there. Okay, from here all the way to here, that's 48 centimeters. Now, if we measured this one, okay, and we take from here, mark it there, turn, and we're looking at something like 14 centimeters. Yeah. Now, you're probably saying like, hey, that's a big spool and a small spool. The diameter varies. So, of course, we're not idiots. Of course. No, you're not. But see, the thing is, while you're fishing, okay, when you're casting this out, the line decreases. And when the line decreases, the diameter of your arbor changes. When you're dropping down, while you're jigging, you're dropping down, the amount of line that you have there, from that diameter, it will be a new diameter. I'm pretty sure you understand that. Less line on the spool, your arbor becomes smaller. Okay? Now, before we move on, I'd like to give you another heads up here. The diameter increases and decreases slower or more rapidly dependent on the diameter of your line. Okay, so for reels that have thinner line, the speed at which your arbor actually decreases is actually slower than with reels that have thicker line. So braid actually helps you out here. Okay, so but the narrower the spool is, the faster it will go down. Okay, because thinner line, well, you could fit more line on the reel if the line is thinner. That's one. But two, because the spool is actually narrow, it doesn't have that much area to actually stack up to. So it stacks up on top onto itself. So even if you have thinner line, if your spool is wider, the diminishing effect of the line going out of your spool is greatly decreased. Again, this is something that I actually made a video of and explained earlier on. This is the whole reason why for my slow jigging, like the bigger size, I don't have a narrow spooled reel. I have a wide one. Instead of a Oshia Jigger 2000, I actually have a Trinidad, which is wider. So I don't really have that drastic of a drop. Now, for spinning reels, it's the same. Of course, it's a spool thing. It's not about the reel. Now, you're saying that maybe, it has ratios and all that, and you could just turn it. Well, yeah, but see, the thing is, the ratio has nothing to do with the line that's on the spool. You could reel, the ratio remains constant, okay? But the amount of line it winds in is actually dependent on the depth of the spool after your cast or after your drop. So when you reel and your line is actually closer to the bottom of the spool, what happens is that it will only go, like, take for example 6 times of that size. So your reel, basically, in a nutshell, progressively goes faster every time you wind line in because the diameter gets bigger. That's something that you need to understand. Now, for this one, okay, you're looking at a fly reel here that I spooled with mono. And this is quite a very important example because, as you can see, it's actually kind of thick. Now, obviously, when I reel with the full spool, it's gonna get faster. And that's one thing that happens. If you have more line, and this is a really good example with the fly reels, because the gearing of this is actually quite simple. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. And this is where you notice it most. And this is actually where I first noticed this whole thing. Now, if you look at the back here, you can see that there is the, well, let's zoom in actually so that you'll see better exactly what I'm talking about here. Okay, so you see this mono right here and you see a red line. Now the red line is actually red braid that I put in just so you could see the white stuff here. Okay, so I put an intermediary line just so there's a very pronounced divide for these things. Now, the whole reason why I'm showing you this is that the retrieval speed is not the only thing that gets affected. What gets affected greatly also is your drag. I have a scale here. Okay, it's not that sensitive, but it'll give you a really good example. Now, if I pulled on the drag, okay, so it's set at 2 pounds. So when the spool is full with line, we have 2 pounds of drag. Now, remember what I've said. The diameter of the line that you have on your spool matters so much because it will determine how fast or how slow you could retrieve. Now, you know, if you're fishing, you want as more line as possible. Some people actually like having powerful line. It's your choice. But the effect of this is actually quite big. Okay, now what we're gonna do is empty out the spool. Okay, and there is something I want to show you at the end of this. And what we're gonna do is actually measure out from the braid. I'm telling you, while we're doing this, it's actually quite difficult because I have to hold it steady. And if you're doing this, actually, you know what? There's an effect. Now, having said that, the reason why I'm actually using a fly reel for this example is actually quite a big thing, okay? Now, when you're fishing, there's such a thing as a spool startup inertia. And what that is when the line gets pulled from the spool, on fly reels, what happens is that it doesn't go up and hit the drag immediately. Now remember, with fly fishing, you're dealing with very thin leaders. Here's an example. Okay, so that's the leader. This is a 10 pound. Okay, 10 pound fluorocarbon tippet. Now, you're dealing with really thin leaders, and what you don't want is that startup inertia. It kicks in and then busts your leader, because in fly fishing you have a tapered leader, okay, and you don't want that tippet to break. And this is the whole reason why a fly reel is actually a very, very good example for this, because fly reels try to mitigate that startup inertia, whereas with your ordinary or conventional fishing gear, startup inertia is there, okay, because you kind of don't need it. Now, what I'm trying to say is that fly reels are more sensitive to changes in drag than their conventional counterparts. So that's a very, very important thing to note. For this one, you can see that if we mark this, obviously, as our bigger example has shown us, now on a full spool, when I turn, and this is a 1-to-1 reel, when I turn, it's going to be way slower, because on a full spool, remember that when you turn, because the diameter is bigger, the line that goes around it is longer, okay? Now, when we're when we hit the white stuff, let's measure, okay? Just as an example of what the variance is. Okay, so, okay, now all I have to do is just pull. I've already put a loop here, just as a guide for us. From having a spool that is almost, let's say, it was there, okay? Just after those holes. So we had about 9 centimeters of line. Now we have, let's get an exact measurement here. We have 6.3 diameter, okay? Now at this diameter, let's test something out. Remember, it was 2 pounds earlier, okay? And we are looking at a good increase right there, you could see, okay? So this is almost about 4 pounds. So it doubled, okay? It doubled. What does that tell you? Firstly, when you set your drag, when the spool is full, you have one drag setting. When you drop your jig down to whatever depth, the drag has significantly changed. And it's the same whether it be a fly reel, spinning, trolling, bait casting, jigging, whatever reel. Just because of the spool diminishing or the arbor diminishing, you actually have a difference in the amount of line that you take in. That's one. And two, it also changes the drag. The reel is now stronger. That's just how it works. And this is something that's there. If you're talking about fishing and you're aware of these things, firstly, if you're casting, imagine this, okay? And let's use this, say this is your cast right here. First thing that you would know is that when you cast out or drop down, for that matter, your drag here is going to be different from your drag here. That's one. Two, without you knowing, while you're working your lure, as it goes up or goes towards you, it progressively goes faster and faster and faster and faster. And this is for you not knowing it. Now, if you're casting out, the fish are biting at a certain speed. For most people, what happens is that they actually, as soon as it's past the halfway mark, they just reel and then they cast again. And for some people, it works. But if you are aware of this, the fish could bite the whole length. Some actually really close to the boat. And this is the whole reason if you're actually retrieving constantly that kind of speed the fish reacts to, you have a shot of actually catching the fish from the apex of your cast or your drop all the way down to close, pretty close to the boat when you're casting, or probably around the middle before you drop down. Now you don't realize this, but when you're actually reeling in, the line progressively goes higher, the speed progressively gets faster, and the reel essentially gets weaker. And it has nothing to do with the reel itself. It just because the diameter of the spool has changed. So again, there's a lot that you could digest from this. It could be that you want to fish faster, and there are ways for that. Like take for example, this is an XG, okay? So super fast retrieve reel, but I have to be conscious that if it's like in the halfway mark, I'd probably want to reel slower if they're responding to something slow and not really reel in fast, and it could get me extra strikes. And it's the same with jigging. When you're dropping down and you're working it and you're getting strikes, and all of a sudden you're not getting strikes anymore, like a certain depth, it could be that it's just too fast for them and they want something slower. But there are also times when they will bite really fast moving jigs or lures, and it might be that your reel is a power gear and you want to switch over to something that's faster. That way you could get more strikes. Now again, this information is here and it's really up to you to use it or not. This is already happening without you knowing it, or some might not be aware, but it's there. It is what it is, okay? And knowing and being aware will help you. And this is the whole reason for this video. And anyway, so that's it in a nutshell. Just to recap, the more line you have on your reel, the faster it would be and the weaker it would be. The less line you have on your reel, the slower it would be, but the stronger it is. The drag setting, as far as the drag setting is concerned, okay? The line progressively gets retrieved faster each time you crank, and that is because of the line getting stacked up onto itself and the diameter changes, and that's just physics. Something that is already happening and something that you may or may not be aware of. Anyway, guys, that's it. Again, if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. If you want to support more, we have Patreon and we have the merch. All right, so thanks so much for watching the video. Happy New Year to everyone. Class dismissed.